With the special Bulls and Bears lineup, Axel Merck, founder and chief investment officer of Merck Investments, joining our panel today. Mike Norman, Dominic Tavella, Gary B. Smith, and Pat Dorsey. Pat Dorsey, first to you, what happened?
Well, I mean, it's funny. I was kind of asking my colleagues some of the same thing, like what triggered this? You know, we had the consumer confidence numbers, as you mentioned. We had a few other things. Nothing in specific, I think. I mean, you never know day to day what kind of jitters are going to affect things. I mean, last night we had some really good numbers from 3M, pre-announcement. Their analyst day is going on right now. You know, and GM's portfolio skews a little bit more consumer than it does CapEx, as say GE does. Skews much more towards corporate spending, big infrastructure stuff. So, you know, I'm not really freaking out yet.
Oh, well, that's good because a lot of other people are, Axel, and I'm very interested to know on a day like this, do you express the same fears? Again, with the China problem, everybody thought that would be the gigantic engine, and the rest of us were little rotors moving around. What about this news out of China? Because that's when the U.S. future started to fall precipitously this morning.
Well, what it shows is that the U.S. has to do the heavy lifting. China is slowing down. In Europe, we have austerity measures. In the U.S., we have headwinds that some of the stimulus money is running out. The census worker will not be showing up in the unemployment report this week. It's going to create a sense of urgency and panic in the U.S. And the U.S. is really the one country that wants to grow at any cost. And that just means that this is pretty lonely out there. We'll have to spend and print more money than anybody else, and we'll see the consequences of that. And the market has some jitters, and at some point the politicians will panic, open the floodgates of the printing press again, and then everybody will be happy again. But for the time being, the reality is setting in, and the reality doesn't look pretty right now.
Gary B., is the market oversold? Is this to be expected, this panic session today?
Well, I think on a day-to-day basis it's oversold. By that I mean you could see a little bit of a bounce, you know, tomorrow or even the next day if we're flat tomorrow. But no, I think Axel said it, and I'd like to, you know, ramp it up by 10. I'm more than worried. I think there's a general, you know, whatever is the word, past malaise. That's where we're at right now. I think people are starting to say, like, all this frickin' stimulus spending, and we're still going to be near 10% unemployment. I mean, I know I look at the job market because, you know, my daughter's about to graduate from college. It is darn lean out there, and I think this is starting to set in on people. That, you couple things like this oil spill where we just seem totally inept in cleaning it up, and I think this works itself into the market, and people finally start to then say, you know what? Heck with it, I'm throwing in the towel, that's it, I can't take it anymore.
Gary B., she's going to move back in. You know your daughter's asking for a room back.
And in that regard, I guess I get a little bit of a raise, but
well, you know,
other than that,
listen,
yes.
I got out of college in '86. The market was terrible. I moved back home, too. Mike Norman came on this set saying it's easy to explain what happened. Okay, Mike,
well, because I've been saying it for months, and anyone who's been listening to me probably has a lot of money in their account right now. Because, look, ever since February when Obama said we are going to focus on deficit reduction, and now the whole entire world with austerity in Europe. And look, you got to be afraid after what came out of the G20 this weekend when they all said we got to cut deficits in half, we got to reduce spending, we got to impose austerity measures. Look, the private sector, for whatever reason, is not sustaining employment and output at the level where it should be. And unless government steps in, we are going into what could be a depression. I'm sorry. And there is a total resistance to sustaining employment and sustaining output. We're in trouble. We're in big trouble.
All right. The question is, Mike brings up the point. I mean, this to the lifeboat attitude that's in the markets right now, and the government is going to be the savior for the markets.
Who else
I mean,
is
look at, but we are talking about unsustainable levels. We had three bubbles blowing up at the same time. To Mike's point, Dom, to what level? Why should we keep artificially high asset inflation values?
And it's not going to happen. People are starting to wake up, whether it's at the consumer level, at the corporate level, in Europe, here in the United States. People are starting to wake up and going, we need to have a fiscally responsible balance sheet.
What's
and it's not going to, well, not what's been going on, Mike. Not what's
been going on. The only way to reduce,
listen, suicide road.
And the only way to reduce government debt is to
take... The Europeans are cutting back, but let's be real here for a second.
The Europeans have to, Dom. They don't have a
hang on, Mike. Hang on.
They don't have a printing press anymore.
Okay, guys, hold on. Let me talk to the one guy who's from Europe, Axel Merck. Although I know you lived in Europe, Mike.
10 years.
Does Switzerland count? I mean, They've done just fine. Oh, great.
So great.
Let me add
Axel,
some.
was
let
it
me
the
add
one?
some
Was it the
comments here.
Greek protest that triggered this again, or something so much more?
No, let's just put some sanity into this. Of course, everybody has on their own vantage point has a point, but let's look at how reality is. The reality is that Europe knows it can't outgrow these problems. Europe will sincerely take these austerity measures seriously. In the U.S., we talk about saving, but we won't save. In the U.S., we will print the money to get out of this. And so if you look at those dynamics, we will end up with a substantially weaker dollar. And sure, they may have lousy economic growth in Europe, but they just can't print as much money as effectively as we can. And so that's how we'll end up. And the government will come to the rescue if Mike wants it to, but I don't think that's going to solve our problems either.
Pat Dorsey, you're shaking your head. Why?
I just love how depressed everybody is.
Me too.
Sell me your stocks.
Right.
Which means buy.
I'm happy. I mean, I can buy Vodafone at 8 times earnings and a 7.5% yield. I can buy Philip Morris at a 5.5% yield and 9 times earnings. People ain't canceling their cell phones. They ain't stopping smoking. There's plenty of places to make money, folks.
And Dom has clients.
90% of the population is employed, paying their mortgages on time, paying their bills on time.
You know, I'll tell you something, Axel, just back to you. Thomson Reuters and University of Michigan last Friday had a positive consumer confidence reading. Today we had a negative one. What gives?
Well, the sentiment is, the problem we have in the U.S. is that we have this fight. The consumer would like to save a little more. The consumer is getting a little bit on the sounder footing, but the market forces are forcing us to save more, and the governments don't like it. And so we have this tug of war. In 1 week, we think the market has the upper hand. 1 week, we think the government has the upper hand.
Okay, but Gary B makes a very important point, and that is the jobs picture. It's still at around 10%, very worrisome. If that begins to at least trend down slightly, as we've started to see with the weekly jobless claims looking slightly better, might that then get some traction and turn things around?
I assume you're asking me that, Liz?
Yeah.
Yes, Gary B.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Look, that to me, you know, forget about China. You know, for 99% of the people, that's just inside baseball. I hate to say it. People are looking at this jobs number. This jobs number so trumps anything from China or anything from the G20. It's not even funny. The jobs number is everything. If people start to see that number, oh my gosh, sneak into the 8% range, it'll be like, hallelujah. I'm afraid, though, it's going the other way. It's going to, what are we at, 9.7? We start creeping up. People are really just going to say, oh my gosh.
All right, Axel,
you know, forget about Mike Norman and all this government stimulus. It's not helping.
Axel, how does the U.S. get into the 8% range?
Well, we won't. Not as easily. That's the challenge. All the policies are on a hope list and wish list, and we hope things are going to get better. But in reality, we are fizzling out here on this, and people are going to panic.
Mike Norman,
and
you
sure,
get the
it might
last
happen
word.
on the road,
It
but
is
not
an
anytime soon.
accounting reality that government deficit spending adds to the financial balances of the private sector. So that's exactly why private sector savings have gone up when the deficit has increased, because the government
The Japanese have done such a great job in trying to print this money by helicopter.
Well, listen, spending equates to income to somebody, to some firm, which then turns around and hires more people who then consume. That's how the economy grows.
Our thanks to the panel and to Axel Merk, author of Sustainable Wealth.
All right, jobs also on the mind of President Obama. Mr. Obama using a meeting